All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a single, pretty explosive claim that's been making the rounds online. The basic idea? That a sitting president pardoned a major international drug trafficker. Now, just a heads up, our job here isn't to play detective and figure out if it's true or false. Instead, we're going to break down exactly how the source builds its case, the questions it asks, and what it tells us about how information like this gets framed.
So let's get right into it. The source we're looking at makes a really serious allegation, and what we're going to do is unpack its argument, piece by piece, starting with who's involved, the core claim itself, and the central puzzle it wants you to solve.
And here's where it all kicks off. This source doesn't ease you in at all. It just opens with a complete bombshell. It immediately sets this dramatic tone, claiming a pardon for someone described in, well, the most severe terms possible. This is the hook, right? The central statement that the entire argument is going to be built on.
Okay, so to understand any claim, you first have to get the basics down, at least as the source presents them. So let's take a look at who it's talking about, what they're supposedly guilty of, and the very specific timeline that's provided for this whole thing.
The guy at the center of this whole story is Juan Orlando Hernandez, and the source makes sure to point out he isn't just anybody. He's a former head of state, the ex-president of Honduras. You know, that one detail is crucial because it immediately raises the stakes of the entire claim. And just listen to how the source describes him. It uses really powerful, really definitive language. He's the biggest drug dealer in the Caribbean. He was convicted under a mountain of evidence, and he was serving a life sentence. See, these aren't just details. They're phrases that are very carefully chosen to paint a super clear and very negative picture of Hernandez right from the start. Now, to make the claim feel a little more credible, the source gives us a specific timeline. It points to two key dates: November 28th, for when the plan to issue a pardon was supposedly stated, and then December 2nd, when a White House official supposedly confirmed it was done. By including these details, the author tries to turn a vague rumor into something that feels like a concrete, dated event.
Okay, so with that basic claim laid out, the source starts to build its main argument. And it does this by creating a really direct and powerful comparison between two different leaders.
And this is where the source's logic really starts to take shape. It brings in Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, as a point of comparison. Suddenly, the argument isn't just about the pardon itself anymore. It's about what that pardon means when you put it right next to how another, supposedly similar leader is being treated.
This slide really lays out the source's whole argument. On one side, you have Hernandez, a convicted drug dealer who is allegedly pardoned. On the other, you've got Maduro, who was also called a narco-trafficker, but he's labeled a narco-terrorist and is being targeted. The author is basically forcing you to ask a simple question: why the completely different outcomes for two people described in such similar ways?
So this comparison leads us right into the heart of the source's message, what it's presenting as a huge contradiction, a kind of riddle that it thinks needs to be solved.
And here it is, the core question the entire piece has been driving toward. The source frames it in the sharpest terms possible. Why would you free one kingpin while trying to kill another one? By phrasing it that way, the author is strongly suggesting that whatever the official reasoning is, it just doesn't add up. This is where the source uses the alleged pardon to challenge a specific political image, that of law and order. The argument is simple, right? How can someone claim to be tough on crime while allegedly freeing a person the source is calling the biggest drug kingpin in this era? This is the central inconsistency the author really wants you to see. So after presenting this riddle, the source offers its own speculative and very harsh explanation. It just dismisses the whole law and order idea and, using some pretty aggressive language, suggests there are other motives at play. Either the pardon was sold or it was part of some plan to get into the drug business. This is the author's answer to the contradiction they've just laid out. And the final verdict from the author is, well, it's blunt. After laying out the claim, the comparison, the contradiction, and the speculation, the source wraps up its analysis by just dismissing the entire situation as a clown show. It's a final, powerful statement of judgment. But the analysis doesn't actually end there. In a really fascinating pivot, after making all these strong claims, the source ends not with a statement, but with a series of major unresolved questions for you, the reader. And here's maybe the most interesting twist of all. The very first question the source poses is about its own validity. After building this entire case, it kind of takes a step back and directly asks you to consider whether the core claim, the pardon itself, is even true. The second question then works on the assumption that the claim is true.
It's like, okay, if we accept the pardon happened, then what could possibly be the logic behind it? It pushes past the simple fact of the event and into the much more complicated territory of motive.
And finally, the source connects its specific claim to a much broader theme. It questions how this alleged action fits into a larger national narrative or helps the country in any way, linking the pardon to these bigger questions of policy and national interest.
So, to sum up the journey this source just took us on, it starts with a shocking claim, builds an argument through a really stark comparison, highlights what it calls a major contradiction, and then, surprisingly, ends by leaving you with fundamental questions about its own truth, its reasoning, and its purpose.
What we've done here is walk through how one powerful online claim was put together, and it highlights a dynamic we see all the time, a story that presents a puzzle and seems to raise more questions than it answers. So we're left with this thought: when a narrative seems designed to confuse you, who really benefits from the confusion?